I never meant for it to happen. She was my friend's mom, graceful, untouchable, a part of my past. But one late night, under soft kitchen light and quiet laughter, a single glance changed everything. I hadn't walked up that old porch in years. The wooden steps creaked beneath my shoes, just like they used to when I was 16, sprinting up here after soccer practice to raid the fridge with my best friend. Back then, this house felt like an extension of my own. Now, standing there as a 20-something, everything looked the same but felt different. The air held that early summer warmth, thick with the scent of jasmine from the hedge that lined the path. Somewhere nearby, crickets were already singing, their rhythm steady and familiar, like a memory trying to wake up. I rang the bell. Inside, soft light spilled through the hallway, painting golden rectangles across the front door. When it opened, for a second, I thought time had rewound. Elena. Her name slipped out before I could stop it. She stood there, framed by the light like a scene I'd forgotten to treasure properly. She wasn't dressed up, just a linen blouse and loose slacks, but something about the quiet elegance of it made me pause. Her hair was pulled back loosely, a few strands escaping around her face. She smiled, that same warm, maternal smile I remembered, except now, for some reason, it hit me differently. It wasn't the smile that changed. I had. Well, look who decided to remember us, she teased softly, opening the door wider. I laughed, stepping inside. As I passed her, her hand brushed my forearm, a light, absent-minded touch, but it sent a tiny, electric warmth through my skin that lingered longer than it should have. I told myself it was nothing. Just a polite welcome. Still, my arm remembered it long after I'd moved on. The house smelled faintly of lemon polish and fresh bread. Familiar. Safe. But beneath it all, there was this strange undercurrent, like walking into a place that held both your childhood and something entirely new. She led me toward the living room, chatting about how long it had been, how her son, my friend, was running late but would be back soon. I nodded along, trying to focus on her words, but my mind kept catching on small details, the way the light slid across her collarbone, the soft rasp in her voice, the way she tucked that loose strand of hair behind her ear without thinking. Somewhere between the door and the sofa, nostalgia had quietly turned into something else. And I wasn't sure I was ready for what that meant. Later that night, after the initial catch-up and the easy laughter with my friend, the house began to settle into that quiet rhythm it always found after midnight. His bedroom door clicked shut upstairs, leaving the living room wrapped in a calm kind of stillness. The kitchen light glowed softly, the kind of warm, golden light that makes everything feel a little more honest. I wandered in, intending to grab some water before heading home, but she was already there. Elena stood by the counter, barefoot, her hair loosened from its earlier tie. She held a half-finished bottle of wine, swirling it slowly as if lost in thought. "You're still up?" I asked. She turned, surprised at first, then smiled faintly. "Couldn't sleep. Old habit. I always end up here at night." There was something comforting about the way she said it. Like the kitchen was her sanctuary, a place where pretenses melted away with the daylight. She poured a little into 2 glasses and slid one across the counter toward me. "Help me finish it. Otherwise, I'll just end up pouring it down the sink tomorrow." I hesitated for a second, then joined her. The first sip was mellow, just like the atmosphere, quiet, slow, almost too intimate for words. We started talking about small things at first, work, travel, the neighborhood. But as the night unfolded, so did the conversation. She told me about the books she'd been rereading, about how the house felt too still now that her son was out most of the time. There was a soft vulnerability in her voice, like these were thoughts she rarely shared. I found myself listening more intently than I usually did with anyone. Every word felt personal, like opening pages she didn't often show people. At one point, I said something, a dry, unexpected joke about how the kitchen light made us look like 2 conspirators. She laughed, head tilting back slightly, eyes glinting with genuine amusement. That sound, it was warm. Unfiltered. For a heartbeat, I forgot everything else. She leaned on the counter beside me, close enough that I could feel the faint warmth from her arm. Our elbows almost brushed, neither of us moving away. The fridge hummed softly in the background, and the scent of her perfume, something subtle and floral, hummed lightly in the air. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't planned. It was just two people standing too close in a quiet kitchen, talking about life at a strange hour. And somewhere between her laughter and the pauses that followed, a quiet understanding began to take shape. By the time I finally stepped outside, the night sky had shifted. What had been a warm, still evening was now thick with the promise of rain. The air smelled sharp and earthy, that unmistakable scent that comes just before a storm. I hesitated on the porch, glancing toward my car parked a few blocks away. A low rumble of thunder answered for me. Behind me, the door opened. "You're not walking in that," Elena said, her voice firm but gentle. She was holding her keys. "I'll drive you. Come on." Before I could protest, a curtain of rain swept across the street, sudden and heavy. It was the kind that soaked you in seconds. I laughed, shaking my head. "All right, you win." We dashed to her car together, both half laughing, half running. The rain hit like a wall, cold and relentless, and by the time we slid into the seats, our hair and clothes were speckled with drops. The doors shut with a satisfying thud, cocooning us inside. The storm outside was instant and fierce. Rain pelted the windshield in thick sheets, drumming against the roof in a rhythm that made everything else fade away. The interior fogged slightly, the air turning warm and close. She started the engine, wipers sweeping furiously. "Looks like you picked the perfect night to visit," she said with a small smile, eyes fixed on the road. I watched her for a moment, the way her fingers rested lightly on the steering wheel, the delicate curve of her wrist as she shifted gears. Her hair had come slightly undone from the rain, a few strands sticking to her temple. She brushed them back absently, and I felt something tighten in my chest. The drive was short, but the silence between us wasn't empty. It was filled with quiet awareness, every breath, every small movement felt amplified by the rain. At a red light, she glanced over. Just a quick look. But I met her eyes, and for a heartbeat too long, neither of us looked away. The world outside blurred into streaks of water and headlights, but inside the car, it was utterly still. My pulse thudded in my ears. I could see the faint rise and fall of her breathing, the soft reflection of the traffic light in her eyes. There was no flirtation in her gaze, just something unspoken. The light changed. She turned back to the road, clearing her throat softly. I exhaled, realizing I'd been holding my breath. When she dropped me off, I thanked her quietly. She gave a small, unreadable smile before driving off into the rain. I stood there for a moment, soaked but awake in a way I hadn't been in a long time. Sunday afternoons in early summer always had a kind of lazy stillness to them. The kind where the world feels half asleep. I hadn't planned on seeing her that day, I was just stopping by to pick up something from my friend. But when I pulled up to the house, the driveway was empty except for her car, and the sound of soft music drifted faintly from the backyard. I followed it around to the garden, and there she was. Elena. Kneeling beside a row of rose bushes, wearing old jeans and a faded white shirt, sleeves rolled up to her elbows. Her hands were covered in soil, hair tied back loosely, a few wisps falling around her face. She looked completely at ease, surrounded by quiet and sunlight. She glanced up, surprised but not displeased. "You're here," she said, shielding her eyes with the back of her wrist. "Yeah. Just picking something up. Didn't mean to interrupt your gardening ritual," I said with a grin. She laughed softly, that warm, unguarded sound I'd come to know. "It's fine. I was almost done anyway." Somehow, I ended up helping her, or at least trying to. She handed me a pair of garden shears, and I made a mess of trimming the stems. She laughed again, shaking her head. "You're terrible at this," she teased. "Hey, I'm a fast learner," I shot back, though I knew she was right. The sun was warm, and the air smelled of damp earth and fresh roses. Bees floated lazily between flowers, and the entire scene felt oddly intimate. Not romantic, not exactly. Just real. Honest. Eventually, we sat down on the wooden porch steps, a pitcher of cold water between us. Her cheeks were slightly flushed from the sun. A faint breeze lifted a loose strand of her hair, and it brushed lightly against my arm. She didn't move away. Neither did I. She was quiet for a moment, staring out at the garden. Then, in a softer voice, she said, "You know, whatever this is, between us. It's just curiosity. You know that, right?" The words hung there. I looked at her, really looked. There was a guardedness in her eyes, but underneath it, something more vulnerable. I could have laughed it off. Agreed. Changed the subject. But instead, I heard myself say, quietly but clearly, "Then let's never stop wondering." She turned to me sharply, eyes searching mine. And in that moment, the air shifted. It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't a confession. It was a line neither of us expected to cross, but neither of us stepped back from it either. The weeks that followed felt strangely hollow. I didn't stop by the house as often anymore. Part of it was deliberate. I told myself I needed space, that maybe a little distance would clear my head. But the truth was simpler, I was afraid of what was growing between us. And yet, the distance didn't make it fade. If anything, it made everything sharper. She lingered in my thoughts at unexpected times, when sunlight hit a cafe window just right, when a song played late at night, when I caught the scent of jasmine on a warm breeze. It wasn't constant, but it was persistent, like a quiet hum beneath the noise of everyday life. When I did see her, things were different. Polite. Careful. Almost too careful. We'd greet each other with those measured smiles people wear when they're both pretending something isn't there. She'd ask about work, I'd ask about the garden, and we'd both keep our distance, as if proximity itself might betray us. At a weekend barbecue a few weeks later, that careful distance was put to the test. My friend had invited a bunch of people from the neighborhood. Kids were running across the lawn, the grill was sizzling, someone had a speaker playing soft music in the background. It was the kind of scene that should have felt simple, familiar. I saw her before she saw me, near the porch, talking with a neighbor, holding a glass of lemonade. She looked relaxed, laughing at something, but there was a part of me that immediately noticed the small things, the way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the tilt of her head when she listened. Those details had become etched into me. When our eyes finally met across the yard, the noise around me faded for a heartbeat. It wasn't dramatic. It was just a glance, brief, quiet, but it landed with the weight of everything we weren't saying. She held my gaze for the smallest moment before looking away, continuing her conversation as if nothing had happened. But that single look lingered. As the afternoon stretched on, we orbited each other like two magnets held apart by invisible hands. Close enough to feel the pull. Too far to give in to it. Driving home that night, the silence in the car felt louder than the music on the radio. I told myself it was better this way, that maybe we were being smart, responsible. But the ache in my chest said otherwise. Distance wasn't dissolving what we felt. It was sharpening it, turning it into something we could no longer pretend not to see. It happened on a night that didn't feel particularly significant, at least, not at first. My friend had invited a small group over for dinner, just a casual get-together in their backyard. Someone strung warm fairy lights across the fence, casting a golden glow over the garden. The air was mild, the kind of night where conversations stretch lazily and time seems to slow down. As the evening wore on, people began to trickle out one by one. Eventually, laughter faded into the distance, car doors shut, and the backyard settled into a quiet hum. I stayed behind to help clean up, stacking plates, collecting glasses. Elena was still there too, moving slowly between the tables with a dish towel over her shoulder. It wasn't planned. We just kept finding ourselves in the same corners, reaching for the same plates, brushing past each other as the string light swayed gently above us. Every time our eyes met, there was that familiar pause. Neither of us said anything, but the air was different, thicker, charged. At some point, I found myself by the porch steps, holding a few empty glasses. She joined me, resting her hands on the wooden railing, looking out at the quiet garden. Her hair had come a little undone over the evening, and the warm light softened every edge of her face. "This house feels too big when everyone leaves," she said softly, almost to herself. I set the glasses down and leaned against the post beside her. "It doesn't feel empty," I murmured. "Just, quieter." She glanced at me then, and there was something unguarded in her eyes, something I hadn't seen since that night in the kitchen. A breath caught between us. "I didn't expect you to matter this much," she whispered. The words hung in the air like something fragile. For a heartbeat, I wasn't sure if I'd heard them right. I took a small step closer. "Then why pretend I don't?" Her hands tightened slightly on the railing. I could see the conflict in her face, fear, longing, hesitation all tangled together. "Because this shouldn't be happening," she said, her voice trembling just enough to betray the weight behind it. I reached for the glass she was still holding, gently taking it from her fingers. Our hands brushed, warm, deliberate this time. She didn't pull away. "All I care about," I said softly, "is whether it's real for you too." She looked at me then, fully, her eyes glistening in the dim light. And slowly, she nodded. The night seemed to exhale around us. Nothing more needed to be said. The confession had already been made, quietly, completely, under the soft glow of string lights. The world looked different the next morning. Maybe it was the soft light, or maybe it was just me. Sleep had been shallow but calm, like my mind had been sorting through something quietly all night. She texted early, just a simple message, "The park's beautiful this time of day. If you're up for a walk." I didn't even hesitate. The sun had barely climbed above the trees when I arrived. The park was almost empty, wrapped in that peaceful hush that only exists in the early hours. Dew clung to the grass, catching the sunlight like tiny beads of glass. Birds were just beginning their morning chorus, their songs floating through the cool air. She was waiting near the entrance, hands tucked into the pockets of a light jacket. The moment I saw her, a quiet warmth bloomed in my chest. She smiled, not the guarded kind she'd worn in recent weeks, but a small, genuine smile that reached her eyes. "Morning," I said, my voice softer than usual. "Morning," she replied, matching my tone. We started walking, slowly, side by side. The gravel path crunched under our shoes. There was no urgency in our steps, no need to fill the silence with chatter. After everything, the quiet between us felt right. For a while, we talked about simple things, the flowers along the path, a couple jogging by, how early morning made everything feel suspended in time. But beneath those easy words, something had shifted. There was no more pretending. No more dancing around the edges of what we both knew. Eventually, she stopped by a wooden bench near the pond. The water was smooth and still, mirroring the pale sky. She turned to me, hands resting lightly on the back of the bench. "I don't know what this will look like," she said quietly. "I don't have all the answers. I just know. I don't want to keep pushing this away." Her honesty landed softly but powerfully. I stepped closer, close enough to feel the faint warmth radiating from her. Slowly, almost instinctively, her hand found mine. Her fingers were cool at first, then gradually warmed as they curled against my palm. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't rushed. It was simple. Real. We stood there like that, watching the water ripple as a breeze moved across it. The sun climbed a little higher, casting a golden glow through the trees. In that moment, it wasn't about labels or explanations. It was about two people choosing to stop running from what was already there. Not an ending. Not a grand beginning. Just, us. Quietly, honestly, together. Some stories don't need fireworks to begin, just a quiet moment, and the courage to stay. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who believes in unexpected love. And tell me in the comments, would you take the risk for a love like this?